Coming up on Regarding Men, a movie review on Falling Down.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Regarding Men, where we hold men in high regard and where red pill isolation comes to die a quick, merciful death. I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co host, Mr. Tom Golden of, well, I should say Tom Minnergood Golden,
Better good?
um, Minnergood.com, and Janice Fiamingo, the wonderful Janice Fiamingo of the Fiamingo File. And we've been toying with the idea of maybe dabbling in some movie reviews, and we decided to make this a first effort. And by all means, please leave us comments, let you know whether or not you like this. But we started with the 1993 effort, Falling Down, starring Michael Douglas, Robert Duvall, and Barbara Hershey. And it is a story of a man at the breaking point with himself, with society, and with family courts and other matters like that. And it begins, I think, Matt, in one of the most greatest openings of a movie I've ever seen, with just a few minutes of Michael Douglas sitting in a car in Los Angeles, stuck in traffic in suffocating heat, surrounded by noise, and just the sense of pressure you get at the beginning of this tells you a lot about what is shaping this character. It's a wonderful metaphor for his life, that being stuck in that traffic. I also took note, I really liked this haircut that he had, and the way he was dressed harkened back to being connected to a different time when things just weren't so god awful for him as it is now. He has sort of a military style haircut, a Mad Men kind outfit with the white shirt and tie. Could be earlier than Mad Men, back to the 50s. And what's also fascinating in this open scene, he finally just snaps and has to get out of this car and go and walk on his way. And somebody yelled and asked him, "Where are you going?" And he gave us his entire motivation in this movie uh, in three words: "I'm going home." And thereby started the Odyssey, worthy of Homer here, of this man's venture out into the world and his encounters. And part of that begins with an interaction with a couple of gang members who he chases off with a baseball bat, which he, by the way, picked up from a convenience store where he has an altercation, and eventually comes to a fast food restaurant where he just wants to go in and get some breakfast. And we'll go ahead and pick up with that.
All right, here we go.
I just want a little breakfast.
Well, you can call me Miss Folsom if you want to.
Sheila, we stop serving breakfast at 11:30.
Rick, have you ever heard the expression, the customer is always right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, here I am, the customer.
That's not our policy. You have to order something from the lunch menu.
I don't want lunch. I want breakfast.
Yeah, well, hey, I'm really sorry.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm really sorry, too.
Get a gun! Let's get organized. Calm down. Just calm down, everybody. Just sit down.
Uh-oh, we've lost Paul. Oh, there he is. Good.
What happened?
Oh, no. You came back. It's okay, Paul.
Yeah, my screen went totally blank.
You're having the same problem I was having.
We had he went into the fast food place and pulled out his gun. And now we're back.
Okay. I think that you're going to edit this part out.
We can if we need to. We don't have to.
Maybe not.
Okay, well, we can just do
We'll
it.
just keep
I
going.
mean, so, well, at least we found that it wasn't Janice's fault. There is something going on with the software here.
Could be.
At any rate,
Yeah.
so this scene, I think, sort of typifies the man against his environment, as it were, in this story, and was very comical. At the same time, I think this was an outreach to the viewer to help us connect with this character. I mean, who of us have not looked at the pictures of food and what we were actually served and wondered, where did the stuff of the pictures go? How did I end up with this? And
Yeah.
let's
I thought-
put it out there.
I thought that
now.
scene was an encapsulation of the rest of the movie. You know, it's like we see the same thing happen over and over and over again for him. He runs into something, he's being a nice guy, someone's a real jackass to him, and he gets to a certain point where he can't hold it anymore and he completely loses it, you know? And it happens over and over, whether it was the first guy, the Korean convenience store owner, or the gang members. He tries to be reasonable and kaboom. And, you know, he says at the end of the movie, he says, how did this happen? I did everything they told me to do.
Right.
And look at me. And to me, this says something blue pill. He has done everything the blue pill has told him to do, and he's kind of looking, what the hell happened to me? What happened to me? So to me, the whole thing is about the blue pill. And in fact, if you look at his opposing character, the cop, there's a cop in the movie who is kind of chasing him in one way or another, he's also has been bitten by the blue pill. Both of these guys are. This is a red pill movie. It's a red pill movie because both of the antagonist and the protagonist are both suffering the same fate, just in a different way. You know, both are suffering from. I mean, we find ourselves during the movie cheering on the cop, want him to get stronger. You know, give him a left, right? And the other guy, we're thinking, tamp it down a little bit. You don't have to be so. But both are kind of reactions, blue pill reactions. You know, we want this guy to be within that blue pill arena. We don't want him to go too far out. We don't want him to be too far in. He's got to be just right. So to me, that the whole thing encapsulated the movie itself. Just that whole idea that this is a daggone blue pill movie, and that I think is why we're doing this review. You know?
Yeah, it's a really interesting movie in that sense. I would say it's trying to be a red pill movie with certain constraints. Like, it's a movie that pretty clearly, and when I say the movie, as if the movie has a consciousness, I guess I'm thinking about the director and the writer mainly. So it seems like the movie it wants to be red pill in the sense that it wants to present a somewhat empathetic portrayal of two guys, both of whom in a way are confronting their own whatever, their disposability, their alienation from their society, the massive disappointment of their hopes and dreams and what they imagined their life would be. And that's what makes the movie so brilliant, is that we have these two guys and two brilliant performances, one by Michael Douglas as the main character who never has a name. He's known by his license plate. He's defense.
That's right.
And in the movie, in a way, I guess he goes into offense, perhaps. Maybe he's been playing defense all his life. We learn, of course, later on as the movie develops that he's lost his job. He worked for the Department of Defense, and now he's been rendered redundant over the last month. And so that's part of what has led to this moment of his breakdown or his breakout. And he's a kind of everyman character in the way he's dressed, in his attitudes. And then the cop, brilliantly played by Robert Duvall, who is also in many ways similarly confronting his own nothingness. He too has lost his family, at least in the sense that well, we can get into that more. And at the end, they have the confrontation that we know has got to come. and the Robert Duvall character, whose name is Prendergast in the movie, he says to the Michael Douglas character that everybody is lied to. They lie to everybody, I think, is what he says.
Right.
And so that's this sort of moment of, I guess, red pill awareness that there are so many lies.
That's a good point.
And here we have these two men who make different choices about how to respond to the lies.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I got the distinct feeling that these two were just each other's mirror through the whole ordeal. And what you also notice about Michael Douglas's character, they just do it very briefly when the cops come to his mother's home where he has been living to investigate. You notice the guy's got a Purple Heart. He's a combat veteran,
Right.
and he served he served his purpose in war, and then he worked for the defense industry, protecting the nation, and they ended up getting rid of him. And there's this beautiful scene, and I forget the actor's name. I've seen him in a few things. A black gentleman who's standing out in front of a place of business with a sign that says, "I'm no longer economically viable."
Yeah.
And of course, this is exactly what has happened to our protagonist here. He has become useless in the eyes of the world. He has no more purpose.
Right.
Then you put on top of that, and not only he's lost it in combat, he's lost it in terms of employment. His wife got rid of him, and there's an interesting story around that. You notice that he has been held away from his daughter because of a restraining order. But when the police start asking her questions, you notice he had never been violent.
Right.
She just thought he might be violent.
Right.
So therefore, he can't see his child anymore. And a lot of this revolves around his deep yearning to be connected to his family, to have that part of his life restored, because everything else has been destroyed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he has gone off the deep end. He's definitely a guy that the police have to stop. There's no doubt about it. He's killing people. He's being totally irresponsible with firearms, to put it very mildly. But this is a guy who has been chewed up and spit out by everything that chews up and spits out men in this society.
Yes.
Every facet of it. He's used up, done, and he doesn't want to take it anymore. And so they make you sympathetic with him. But then I think Janice really hit on something important here. We don't know exactly what the filmmaker's intent was with this message. I know it was to maybe, bring about some sympathy for this character, some understanding, but also in the end, they turn it back on him and make it so he is. And what's really interesting, he says in the end that one of his last words is, "So I'm the bad guy."
Right.
In total disbelief. And guess what this society does with men who reject blue pill mentality and start acting on what they want and attending to their own needs? It kills them.
Yep.
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 Exactly what happens.
Yes.
Either socially it kills them, or as in this case, physically it kills them.
Yes. I'm not so sure the movie was in any way trying to be red pill. It was filmed during the Rodney King riots near Los Angeles. So it's like that was a part of the gestalt of things at the time. So I'm not sure that it was trying to be red pill. In fact, I don't think it was, but it certainly is a message that's there. And what really got me was that what they did with this character, with the character of Bill, or Defense, was they made him both the villain and the victim. Very similar to the Joker movie. Remember where they made the Joker both the villain and the victim, and so it just tears at us. We're not sure which way to go with this. And that was, I thought it was masterful the way they did that. It was actually 30 years before the Joker.
Yes.
And they did a really nice job of that.
It's
I
interesting you
agree
point that out.
absolutely that it's a kind of precursor to the Joker. Of course,
Yeah.
totally different kind of context, different sort of character, but the same kind of, as you say, masterful creation of moral ambiguity. Because we do
Yes.
empathize with him. We see pain in his face, especially in those
Yes.
final scenes. And
Yes.
those are the scenes, of course, that stay with you. There are other parts that are funny, of course, as we saw in that the I want my breakfast scene. It's funny, but also kind of like it's like realism verging on caricature, because it's somewhat stylized, it's somewhat overdone, it's not entirely realistic in the
Right.
performances. It's a little bit exaggerated, and that allows a greater detachment on the part of the viewer, I think.
Yes.
But at the same
Yes.
time, it's realistic enough and well, it's compelling enough that we do feel empathy for this guy, even though we recognize that what he's done is totally unacceptable. You can't
Yes.
go around shooting off,
Yes.
all sorts of amazing military equipment and terrorizing people and firing a
You could
gun into
want to, though.
yeah, and so it does appeal to that. For sure. There is empathy, I think, that is provoked in at least some viewers for this man's plight, and especially because of the domestic element. The fact that at the very beginning, when he gets out of his car and somebody says, "Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going home." And then he has this huge, as you said, Paul, Odyssean circular journey, circling back to the home. And he's especially distressed that he can't see his daughter on her birthday. And I thought that scene that you mentioned, Paul, was brilliant, where it's this exchange between the ex-wife and a police officer. And she has summoned the police officer to her home precisely because she's afraid of her ex-husband. But that is an interesting exchange. Was he ever violent? Well, no. But then she says, but I felt he could be, and I didn't want to wait around to find out. And, we can't simply dismiss that, because obviously the film shows that the guy must have been under tremendous strain. There's even a bit where he's watching old family movies where he became angry with the daughter. Remember?
Yes.
Can't even remember exactly, but and you hear he's watching. This is after he's gone into the home, and the mother and
Right.
his ex-wife and her daughter have fled, and he's watching these family movies on their TV, and she's chastising him because he's made their daughter frightened, because he's become angry. So we do, sympathize with the ex-wife to a certain extent. She probably had reason to fear his stress and his tension and that simmering kind of unstable anger, just as his own mother said that sometimes at dinner he would be sitting there so angry, and she couldn't even finish chewing her food. This is a man who makes a joke out of during that in the breakfast scene, makes a joke out of an old woman being so scared by his brandishing of firearms that she spits out her food, and he says, "Oh, we've got an unhappy customer here." So it's funny and it's horrible at the same time, and it is realistic, because we can really respond to his longing to be with her daughter. And yet the film, it couldn't imagine a case where a man was actually totally unjustly deprived of his children. We know that happens all the time, with no basis in reality, simply because the ex-wife doesn't want her ex-husband around anymore. So she makes up stories about his violence that are totally untrue, and he doesn't see his kids for years, or maybe for the rest of their lives, and he's alienated from them. The film, it doesn't seem like it could have, it's not trying to be that sort of a film. So you could maybe say that it's a little bit morally incoherent in that way. It wants us to empathize with him, but it also can't really take his side
Right.
entirely.
Right.
And that's made clear, I think, when we see his mirror opposite, the Robert Duvall character, who's in a similar situation. He's got a unstable, shrewish wife who controls his every move. He's taking early retirement from the police force, which is the only thing that gives him meaning, because she can't handle his job. And she lectures him on the phone. She phones him alternately crying, then an hour later happy, then an hour later angry at him, and he never knows which woman is going to be on the other end of the phone. And he's totally changing his entire life. They're moving to Arizona because that's where she's decided she wants them to go. What he's going to do in Arizona, aside from rot sitting out on the porch maybe, or who knows what he's going to do. It's not going to be a satisfying life for him. And yet that is the only other option that there really seems to be offered. You either accept a kind of living death, a burial, or you go out in a blaze of comic and horrible glory as the other character does. There don't seem to be many other choices for men like this.
Right. There
What's
is no
also
good end
interesting
for the
about-
blue pill.
No, there's
Yeah.
not. And what was interesting about that part with him too, this infantile woman that he's married to, she's emotionally about 2, and he has to contend with that throughout the movie. She's abusive, and he contends with that. Overtly, very controlling and abusive. But what's fascinating is the pinnacle moment for Duvall really isn't when he shoots Michael Douglas. It's when he finally tells his wife to shut up.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
As though that he's recaptured his manhood in that. But the way they also told it, which I think lends a lot of credibility to what Tom was saying about what the message they were trying to send. At the end, when they throw him a sort of a insulting going away party, and one of the cops says something about his wife right after inferring that he was a coward at the job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and they were inferring this all the way through the movie. He had apparently been involved in a shooting, had not been back on the street since then, and everybody had begun to wonder if he had it anymore, if he was just a coward or what. And he puts up with that without reacting. But the moment somebody insulted his abusive wife, he punches him in the face. And gosh, is that gynocentrism just totally demonstrated right there?
Yep.
That this guy will put up with all manner of abuse from women. He'll take it from other men, but somebody insults his fair maiden, they're going to have hell to pay for it. Or if somebody feels like a threat to a woman, he might just have to kill them, which is what happens at the end of the movie. This was a very blue pill message. And I'm sure that there were millions of people in the audience of this movie, the moment he punched that other cop for insulting his wife, that were fist pumping emotionally and saying, yeah, you go, you got your strength back. No, he didn't.
Right.
He was a slave that was going to be dragged into the desert against his will because he couldn't say no to an abusive woman.
Yeah. Well, worse even than couldn't say no, couldn't imagine doing anything other than trying to compensate for his wife for the disappointment that she feels with her life. Because he says at one point to his partner, or his former partner, and that's another interesting kind of relationship, because this former partner is a younger woman and is worried about him and doesn't think he should be moving to Arizona, and knows full well that his wife is abusive and controlling.
Right.
He also, reaffirms to her that he loves his wife, and therefore she shouldn't worry about him. But of course, that's not really the question. Of course, he loves his wife. It's what he is allowing his wife to do to the both of them. And he tells this former partner that his wife is unhappy because she was a very beautiful woman in her day, and now she's not beautiful anymore. And it's very difficult when that's all a woman ever had, as if that's his fault and his responsibility to fix it, even if it means that his own life is going to be a kind of, living burial. And yeah, it's a pretty stark message at the end there. This is the good man. And he even sits there with the little girl, the daughter of the Michael Douglas character, at the very end of the film, after he's shot her dad and saved her, presumably, because he thinks that Michael Douglas was going to kill his wife and daughter, which maybe he was, it's not clear. So he's saved her and he's killed her father, and he sits on the front stoop of her porch. She doesn't know that her dad is dead, and he asks her name, and she asks him his name, and he says, "My name's Mud." And she laughs, and he says, "Well, that's, when my wife realizes that I'm still a cop," and presumably because he's going to be going home late once again, and his wife is going to be angry, and he's going to have to be apologetic. I mean, it wasn't clear, but there's still that kind of rueful acceptance that his role in that marriage is to be the henpecked husband. It's pretty bleak.
I got the
that
feeling.
is go ahead.
I got the feeling during that scene that he was basically saying he was going to keep being a cop.
Well, I wondered that too. Yeah, I wondered that too. Although he just told his boss to fuck off on public television.
Perfect.
So I don't know how he's going to.
That was beautiful.
That really was.
Yeah, I think the message was that he was going to continue to be a cop. He had found his spine with her, finally told her to shut up. He found his spine with the captain. He's finally starting to man up, as it were. And I think he probably had decided that he was going to be a cop, but there's no way this guy wasn't going to be a henpecked cop, because that was the lot in life that he. And I think that's the message in that. And this is what so many blue pill men, this is their lives. They're this is the way things are. You can't do anything about it.
And there's no alternative.
Right. And there's no alternative, because the idea of being, even if she's the most abusive, godforsaken bitch that ever walked the planet, she's still the woman in his life.
Yes.
And I have seen this so many times with men that are like, "Oh, what are you going to do? You got to try to make them happy. You can't, you can't be selfish. You got to give in to them." And I mean, I've seen in asking people who were married 40, 50 years, how they made things work, over and over again, men saying, "Give them whatever they want."
Yeah.
And it will make things work, which is like,
unfortunately, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And certainly the film does affirm that, but the reason I think it's a really interesting film for our purposes is that it affirms it, but in a very bleak kind of way.
Yes.
It's not a triumphant kind of ending. We can't imagine that his future, I guess he will be back on the force, but I can't imagine that
it's just a different kind of blue pill.
He's going to continue to get these phone calls every day from his wife that are both embarrassing for his role with his fellow police officers, and that are agonizing for him, because he's constantly having to respond to whatever violent or hysterical mood his wife is in. And you see what that does to him day after day after day. And it's the thing he has accepted. It's part of what makes him, in the film's terms, a good man, but it's also part of what makes him a very sad man.
Yes.
And I mean, I think it's interesting, at the very beginning of the film, he's there in that traffic jam too. And which is presented in a kind of hellish, it's almost like a hell, right? Because there's these flies, you can hear them buzzing around. It's infernally hot. The faces of the people that the Michael Douglas character is looking at from inside his car, they look all distorted and hideous. Even children laughing look kind of demonic and awful. And his attitude to the hell is, well, this is where I am, and I might as well make the best of it. He's the one that gets out and helps to push the car that Michael Douglas has abandoned off the road. And even though he gets no thanks for it from the other police officer, and that's just his life. He's not well liked. His own commanding officer doesn't like him. I don't know why, because he didn't swear or something bizarre. He's somebody who's always on the margins, never gets the respect he deserves, but he's made his peace with that, and that's the best he can hope for. So it's a very, it's I would say it's a kind of blue pill movie shading to red, because it has this very heightened recognition of the sadness of these men's lives.
Yeah, and it was a blue pill movie because the whole thing was about what women want. Whether it was the wife of the defense or the wife of the of the Duvall. I mean, it was all about what women want, and it reminds me of William Collins's book where he talks about gynocentrism, and he says some really interesting things. I'm going to paraphrase here, but he basically says women's wants become men's wants. Women's desires become men's desires, and this leads to a ceding of moral authority to women. To me, that just kind of encapsulated things. Went, holy crap, that's it, because we see that with this movie. We see how the whole thing's about what women want. It's not about what these guys wanted until they blew,
And it makes you wonder. I mean, we see this over and over again. And one of the things I really did appreciate about this movie is that if you can look for it, I mean, a blue pill person is going to see an entirely different message than we will in this movie.
Right. Exactly.
But you can look throughout modern times when guys have freaked out, killed their families, done really crazy stuff, shoot their wives, then shoot themselves. You have to wonder how many of these guys, because this was a guy pushed to the edge. He didn't want to be there. He didn't wake up in the morning and decide I'll be a dangerous person. He wanted the love of a family. He wanted a sense of purpose in his life with employment. He wanted the fact that he was wounded in combat to mean something to people. And all of that was taken away. And then you end up with guys doing crazy things. And that's not said to excuse them from their behavior. We have to hold people accountable for what they do. But the fact of the matter is that guys like this are made, not more than they're born. And it is, I think that is the moral lesson in this for those who can look into it.
It's a good point. That's what you see with each of the interactions with defense the whole time. Was someone pushed to the degree that he couldn't handle anymore, and kaboom, he blew. But that was the other thing, is this movie was filled with portraying men as assholes. I don't think there was one mature man in the entire frickin' movie.
Robert Duvall, he was the symbol of manhood.
Not in my opinion.
Oh, I know. This is in the blue pill world.
That's in a blue pill world, yes. But as far as a mature man who's standing on his own, who's red-pilled, who's able to say no, and able to set his own limits, no, I didn't see one.
No.
Maybe the doctor, the guy at the big mansion, but that was just a tiny part. But, almost all men were portrayed as being assholes.
Yeah. And the good man, the Robert Duvall character, he actually says to the Michael Douglas character at the very end, just before he kills him, that you've got one thing that's of value about you and your life, and that's your daughter.
Right.
He doesn't say, it's you, it's the work you've done, it's the contribution you've made to your society or anything like that. He couldn't care less about that. It's your daughter. Well, the guy's been alienated from his daughter. He's not going to see his daughter for the rest of his life anyway. Right. So, what a bizarre thing to say, but that's what the man who has accepted his inferior and secondary status will say. That's, I thought that was very effective.
His exact words were, the only thing special about you is your daughter.
Right.
That's it. Yeah.
Without that, he is totally worthless and meaningless.
Yeah.
Just like the guy that they arrested for carrying the sign outside of his work saying he wasn't economically viable. And there's a lot of nuance in all these scenes. And one of the things I loved about that scene was as they're driving this guy off to jail for creating a scene, he looked and says, "Don't forget me," as he disappears into the memory hole.
Right.
Yeah.
And Defense nods. It's almost like he kind of communicated with him at that moment.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
He knew what the guy was. He knew what the guy was feeling, what he was going through.
Yes. Yeah.
And even adopted his language and used the term "not economically viable" later in the movie.
Yes,
to explain his own plight. Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. That's a great movie.
If a man isn't economically viable, he might as well be dead.
Right. Right. Yeah. His value is diminished.
In the blue pill world.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
At any rate, it was a good movie.
Yeah,
Very good
definitely
movie.
worth seeing. Yeah.
You could cheapo rental on YouTube. It's also available on Amazon. It's like a $2.99 rental, but it is a timeless, I think, piece. I didn't get a sense of it being, terribly dated or anything in this. It was, I think, a timeless story
Yeah, man.
that applies just as much today as it ever did.
And please leave in the comments if you want us to do more movie reviews. And
Yeah.
if you do want us to, how you'd like to see them done. Because we've given away quite a bit today about the plot and what happened. And I'm not sure that's the best thing. So let us know. Let us know what you think.
Right.
Yep.
Sorry.
Let us know what you think. And if you have movies you'd like to see reviewed, let us know about that
Yeah,
too.
yeah, good idea.
Consider all suggestions.
Yeah. Good. Are we finished?
All right. Yeah, I guess we
I
should
think
finish
we're
by
finished.
saying that men
Are
Good. We did it.
again.
All right.
we did
Not
it.
bad. First time today. All right. You all take
First
care.
time this year.
We'll see you then.
see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.